Welcome. Thank you for joining me. Grayboardgamer here with the first game of Season 1, Wave 1, and I've chosen to do Lucidity, Six-Sided Nightmares. Designed by Shannon Kelly, art from Stephanie Gustafson, Tyler Johnson, and William Webb. Published by Foxtail Games and Renegade Game Studios. This game will fall into the over $20 but under $50 price range here in the first wave. As of the time I'm recording this playthrough, you can purchase the game on Amazon for just a little over $30, 30 and some change. And it's also available on Cool Stuff Inc.'s website for $21.49. Also, depending on where you live, it may be available at your local FLGS, so you can also look there and give your local business some support too. Again, this is my choice to play this game, so we're going to have voting for other games that are going to be here in Wave 1, and we're still going to do the BIOS Megafauna playthrough here in Wave 1. Just didn't want to do that quite yet, didn't want to dive into a heavy rule set, so I pushed that a little further back here in Wave 1, and we're going to go ahead and do Lucidity, Six-Sided Nightmares. Let's go ahead and get set up. First, each player, and in this case I'm doing a solo game, you're going to take one of these Dreamer cards, and as you can see, there's a lot of glare on it from my overhead light, so I'm going to swap this out with the neoprene matte version of the Dreamer card that I'm going to use for this playthrough. This was part of the Kickstarter, the additional content that came with it, along with a couple of expansions, and it also came with these really nice overlays. They go right over top of the mats and the dice lock in really nice, but as you can see, we're going to get a lot of glare if I use those. I could turn out my overhead light, which I just did, and it doesn't look too dark, so we may go with that. When I'm doing the editing, if it's too dark, I can always bump up the brightness in post-production, and I'll do that if necessary. But we'll go ahead and use the nice handy overlays because it really keeps the dice in place. Also, each player will take one of these sleep markers, these clear beads, and one of the handy reference cards that tells you how the turn sequence goes, and it also shows you what is on the 6 sides of each of the colors of the dice. Next we have the 80 dice that came with the game, 20 of each color, and you place all of them into the bag, the draw bag that came with the game also. In the solo game, we're going to come up against one of the 4 solo enemies. First up we have the Lord of the Depths, the Lady of Envy, Lord of Imprisonment, and the Lady of Primeval Fear. And to select which one of these 4 I'm going to go up against for this playthrough, I'm going to roll my triple 4 here, and as you can see, you got 1, 2, that's the 3, and the 4. So we'll count from the top, 1, 2, 3, 4, see who I'm going up against, and that is a 3. Which means we're going to be dealing with the Lord of Imprisonment. Let's take a close-up look at the Lord of Imprisonment's card. We have this really great art on here. Each card has this hard mode, so if you're finding it too easy, you can always step it up a notch. Now we have to populate these rows and columns here, and these are called spooks. In our left-hand column, we have this eye symbol, which means shadow, and over here we have the moon with the Z symbols, and those represent exhaust. While they're on this card, they're referred to as spooks, but you'll hear me refer to that symbol on the left as shadow and the one on the right as exhaust during the game. In order to populate our card here with our spooks, we're going to draw from the bag randomly, and starting at the bottom and working our way to the top. So for example, we'll start at the bottom left here, and we'll draw a yellow, and it's going to have to match that face. So we're going to turn it to the shadow side, and place it on the card. And then we'll go next to it with a blue, and we'll flip it over to the exhaust side and do the same. And I will continue to do this until the card is fully populated with spooks. Now we're all set. The card of the Lord of Imprisonment is fully populated with spooks. We have the shadows on the left and the exhaust on the right. Let's go ahead and start the game. Also coming into play, we have the nightmares, the nightmare of the depths, the nightmare of imprisonment, the nightmare of primeval fear, and the nightmare of envy. We'll keep those placed off to the side and we'll bring them into play when necessary. And I'll explain how that works as we go through the gameplay. There are two ways to win the game. Either we fill our power row up with 15 power, or once all of these spooks are off of the Lord of Imprisonment's card and have been moved down to our Dreamer's card, every one of these nightmares that have been awoken means we have at least 2 power to win the game. For example, if we had 3 of these nightmares awoken, we'd have to have at least 6 power once all of those spooks move down. If we had 6 or more in that example, we win. If not, we lose the game. We can also lose by the hunt row filling up. If at any time this is full and we get to the check for filled rows section of a turn, we lose. Also, the way that the nightmares get awoken is if all 4 of these spots are filled on the shadows row over here. When we go to check for a filled row, that would awaken the nightmare. So if we woke up the nightmare of primeval fear, we would then take the card, leave it next to our board so we know that it is awoken. If that same one is awoken a second time, then we lose the game also. And this is for the solo rules. It plays a lot different in multiplayer because you're going against other players and you can actually become these nightmares. But we'll concentrate on the solo rules, and I'm going to play this with the base game, even though I'm using the neoprene mat and the acrylic overlay here, which I don't think come with the base game. Other than the upgraded components, everything else is going to be the base game that you can purchase for $30 or less. And this is a press your luck style game. And the first thing you do during your turn is you choose a sleep track. And here we see the 3 separate sleep tracks. You can start by drawing 3, 4, or 5 dice. It's up to you. And what you do is you draw those dice randomly from the bag, and you're going to return 2. So if we go with 3, that means we're only going to be left with 1, 4 left with 2, and 5 left with 3. I like to be more aggressive in the beginning, especially when I don't have anything on my player board like this. So I'm going to choose to go to the 3rd sleep track and start with 5 dice. So now we'll randomly draw 5. That's 4, and 1 more for 5. Now I'm going to choose 2 of those to go back in the bag. And if we look on our reference card, we can see we're dealing with green and yellow. The green is the Dreams of Envy dice. It has 2 shadows, 3 power, that's what that number 1 symbol is, and 1 exhaust. And the yellow has 2 shadow, 2 power, and 2 exhaust. So I'm going to remove the yellow and put them back in the bag, leaving me with 3 green to roll because I have a 50-50 shot to gain power. So we'll roll our 3 dice, and we gained 1 power, 2 power, and a shadow. So now we have to resolve those dreams. These dreams get resolved in a particular order. And if we look on our reference card, it says you resolve dreams in the order of power first. So we got power number 1 and 2. So we're now at 2 total power. Then we would resolve hunt, we have none. Then we would resolve exhaust, we have none. And then we would resolve the shadows. And this is going to be a shadow of envy. Our shadow of envy will go on to the track. And under the shadow of envy, to resolve it, it says reroll 1 dream of next player's choice. Well, that does not apply for the solo game. The shadow of envy in the solo rules states since there is no next player, when you resolve a shadow of envy, you must instead reroll the first dream in your power row. Which means we'll take the first dream in our power row here and re-roll it. And luckily we got power again. So that can go right back in place on our power row. Pretty good start so far. Now we would check for filled rows, starting with hunt. Again, if this was filled, we would lose the game. Then for exhaust, if we were full of exhaust, or that row was full, we could no longer continue to dream and we'd have to rest. And then we check to see if any of these rows are full, and none of them are. So we can choose, do we want to rest and end our turn, or press our luck and continue on? Since we had such a good start, let's press our luck and continue on. We'll move on the sleep track onto 7. So now we will now roll or draw 7 dice from the bag. And we'll see what we get this time. That's 5, 6, 7. Now we know our green has our best chance for us to get power. We don't see any blue here. Blue is your worst chance because it has 3 shadow symbols on it. We don't have to worry about that. Red has 2 shadow, 2 power, one of which is a 2, 1 exhaust, and 1 hunt. So we have to return 2 dice to the bag. And I will choose to return 2 yellow. We'll roll our 5. Ooh, that's insane. Wow. All exhaust on all 5 dice. That is crazy. All 5. There is only 1 exhaust symbol on the red die and 1 on the green, and we managed to get them. If you run out of space in a row, you just put the additional dice next to it. The only thing we had to resolve was exhaust, and they're all there. Now we check for filled rows. Not in the hunt, but that is full. When the exhaust row is full, that means I have to end my turn, and I have to draw 1 random dream from the bag. Hopefully it's not green, and I'll explain why. And it's blue, and that'll go right back in the bag. The reason the color of that random draw when you get exhausted matters is, for example, this was blue. Any color in the power row that matches that one would come off of my power row and go back into the bag. So if I drew green, both of these would come off and I would lose all of the power that I have right now. Now that I have to rest, all of the spooks in the bottom row go from the Lord of Imprisonment in this case and move onto my card. So this yellow shadow would go into the imprisonment row. Now you don't resolve it when they move from here. They just move down. And this blue exhaust will join all the other ones there. And then all of these rows shift down. If there were any gaps, they would fill in, but in this case, no gaps, so they just shift down. When you rest, whether you're forced to or not, you gain a little bit more control over your dreams. You can remove 1 shadow symbol from your player card or all exhaust symbols. I'm definitely going to choose that. So all 6 of these will come off and go back into the bag. Now if I chose to remove one of these instead of my exhaust, the exhaust would stay, which means I would only get one roll, because at the end of my roll and resolve, I would check for a filled row and exhaust would be filled again. Sometimes you have to do that, but in this case, I don't have a lot of shadows over here to worry about yet. So my token will come off and we're ready to begin our next turn. I'm going to stick with the aggressive play here early on and go for 5 dice again. Grab our 5. Need one more. When choosing which dice to put back in the bag, I like to keep in mind what I have coming next. I'm going to have another yellow and a green come down, so I probably don't want to roll a whole bunch of yellow and fill up my imprisonment row too quickly. I don't want to wake up the nightmare of imprisonment super early in the game. Don't want to wake up any of them super early. But blue is our worst one to roll, but we don't have any shadows in our blue row yet. If you want to re-roll any of these dice, or their dreams, you have to spend the same color from your power row. So if I want to re-roll all 3 of these yellow, I would have to take 1 yellow from my power row, and then I would place it on the nightmare track. So if I took 1 yellow off of here, it would go right here, and I would re-roll 1, 2, or 3 of them. It'd be my choice. I don't have to make that decision here because I only have green power and there are no green dice. So I will place 2 yellow back in the bag because I have yellow coming. We'll roll and get an exhaust, a power, and another shadow. And I've placed them in resolution order. First we'll resolve the power, then we'll resolve our exhaust, and now we have to resolve our first shadow. Other than the ones we moved down, again, they're not considered resolved. So we're going to put a resolved shadow or resolved dream onto the shadow of imprisonment. And when you have to resolve the shadow of imprisonment, if you have any exhaust symbols in your exhaust row, you rotate one of them to the shadow side. In this case, we only have 1 to choose, so it will get rotated to its shadow side. It stays in the exhaust row, but now it's harder to get rid of because it's not an exhaust symbol anymore. And I think I'm going to risk it again and go for another round of dreaming and draw 7 dice. Let's see what we get this time. Hopefully a lot less yellow. 5, 6, 7. Drew 2 more yellow at the end there. Well, I'm definitely going to pull the yellow out of there because we already have 2 yellow shadows in place. And we'll roll these 5. Not bad. I see 3 power and 2 shadows. Unfortunately, one of them is yellow. We will resolve our power first, which we're doing pretty good for power here. We're up to 6. Now we have to resolve our dreams, these shadow symbols. First up, I'll do Primeval Fear. When you resolve the shadow of Primeval Fear, you can take any one shadow symbol of any color from anywhere on my Dreamer card and move it to my Hunt row. And that can get dangerous because you only have 4 Hunt and then the game is over. I also am filling up this row pretty fast. So I'm going to move one of these yellow to the Hunt row because of the resolving Primeval Fear, and then I'll play my other shadow on the shadow of imprisonment. And in this case, we don't have any more exhaust symbols to turn, so we're okay there. Another thing you can do to try and minimize what's coming up here is you can re-roll the spooks also. And to do that, you have to spend a power from your power row, and it would go back into the bag, but it has to match the color again. For example, if I wanted to re-roll these yellow, they have to be adjacent to each other if you want to do multiples. So in this case, I could re-roll these 3 yellow right here because they're all touching each other. Diagonal does not count, so I could not re-roll both of those red together. I could spend a red and re-roll one of them, or I could re-roll these two green together. And I'm going to do that with the green. I'm going to spend one green, goes back into the bag, shift the power down, and now I can re-roll these two. When I re-roll these, any power numbers that come up will go back into the bag and they'll be cleared off of the spooks track there. Anything else that comes up goes right back on, no matter what symbol it is. Oh, not very good. That almost changed nothing. We have exhaust again, which is what it was, and now we have another shadow. These will get placed back on the track starting from the bottom up, and I'll go ahead and put the shadow on the bottom and then the exhaust on top. And there's no gaps to shift down, so it just stays like that. Also note that you can re-roll these as many times as you want, so I could spend another power and do it again. Also, you can only re-roll the spooks on the boogeyman card after you do the roll and resolve dreams step, which I already did. I already rolled and resolved all the dreams that I had. And I think this is early on. I don't have any nightmares that have awoken, so I'm going to spend another green and re-roll those two dice a second time, hoping for at least one power symbol. Yep, got one power symbol and one shadow. The power symbol goes back in the bag and the shadow goes into the place on the bottom. Then this row will slide down to match it, and now we have a couple of red next to each other too. And since we have those red right next to each other, let's go ahead and do it again. We'll spend one red and re-roll those two, hoping for some power. And we got a power symbol and a shadow, so we're going to get rid of one of those reds. The power 2 symbol went back in the bag, and now we have to place our shadow symbol. And the rules say to place them from bottom to top. It doesn't say left to right. So I'm going to place it over here on the right side and shift these down. That way, if I can get a yellow power, I have 4 that I can re-roll here. Again, we don't have any filled rows, so I could push it again and move up to 9 and keep 7 dice. That would be really risky, but I think I'm just going to go ahead and go for it. And we'll go ahead and max out and draw 9 dice. 2, 4, 6, 8. We need one more. We're going to get rid of 2. I'm going to keep the green because they have the best chance of rolling power. I'm going to keep the yellow in the hopes that I can roll power, and then I can attempt to re-roll those spooks. And I'll get rid of the 2 red because I have 1 red already, and I don't want to roll any more hunt. And I don't have any blue shadows yet. Hoping for a lot of power here, at least one of them being yellow. And we rolled pretty terrible, but we got 3 power. The green is out of control with envy here. So we have 3 envy shadow, 1 imprisonment shadow, and then 1 each power of yellow, green, and blue. Now I could choose to spend a green to re-roll these 3, and that would put that 1 green power there. And I'm going to do that because otherwise I'm going to have to put 4 of them there anyway. So we'll spend 1 green and re-roll those 3. Hopefully we don't get 3 shadows again. And that was not worth it. 2 shadows and an exhaust. That definitely went poorly. Let's just go ahead and go with it, and let's put our power down because those resolve first. That'll bring us up to 5. Our exhaust will go into place. And now we have to place our dreams. First, we'll do our imprisonment, which means this exhaust will flip to a shadow. envy means we have to re-roll our first power, and our power becomes, oh, it actually stays. I would have put that right back in place, but we have to resolve another envy, which means we re-roll this again, and we got it back. Very nice. So our power goes right back in place. Unfortunately, we have to look for filled rows. We don't have any problems with the hunt or the exhaust, but our first nightmare will wake up. These 4 dice go back in the bag, and the nightmare of envy wakes up. We'll place it right next to the board here so we don't forget about it. And what happens now is whenever we draw dice, anytime we go to return the 2 dice, we cannot return the color of any awakened nightmares. So any green dice that come out have to stay. And as more nightmares awaken, more dice have to stay. And it can even mean that you can't or are unable to return 2 dice to the bag. So right now we have 1 awakened nightmare, and we have to be careful because if we wake up the same one again, the game is over. We cannot go again. We're at the end of our sleep track, which means we have to rest. We don't have to draw a die because we weren't forced to rest because of exhaustion. When we rest, the 2 lowest spooks move down. So that gives us 1 back in envy and fills up imprisonment. Now it does not wake up the nightmare of imprisonment because the check for filled rows portion of the turn has already occurred, and that won't happen until next time. We have to check for rows. These will move down, and now that I'm resting, I can either get rid of all exhaust, which I have none, or 1 shadow. Now I could choose to get rid of 1 of the imprisonment shadows, or I could get rid of 1 of the exhaust shadows. I do have a yellow and red coming next, so if I get rid of 1, 1's going to come again anyway. So I'll get rid of the exhaust shadow, so I'm not forced to rest too early. This time I'm going to go a little more conservative and only draw 4 dice. Because the nightmare of envy is awoken, the green has to stay. I don't want to, well actually rolling the yellow is not so bad because the track's already maxed out anyway. You'll just add it next to them. Since it looks like the nightmare of imprisonment is going to wake up anyway, let's get rid of the red and yellow. Roll these 2, and there's another yellow shadow but a green power. The green power will resolve first, then the shadow of imprisonment. We'll put it off to the side. We don't have any exhaust symbols to flip to shadow. And now I can choose to re-roll spooks, which I'm going to do before we check for filled rows. I'm going to spend 1 yellow, and that will go back to the bag, and re-roll these 3 yellow adjacent spooks. Maybe I'll get super lucky here and roll 3 power. Nope. 1 power, 2 shadow. So 1 at least will go back to the bag, and these 2 will go back starting at the bottom, and I'll put this one right above it. That way it's still adjacent, and that'll cause this red to come down and join the other red. We're doing okay. We're going to check for filled rows. The nightmare of imprisonment will awaken. Again, we have really nice art on these, and they're double-sided. They're the same on either side, just different art. And since this art is similar to the Lord of Imprisonment, I chose to keep it on this side with the person struggling to get out of the coffin. Oh, let me show you the other side of envy. So we have 2 nightmares that have awoken. So any yellow and green that we draw have to stay to be rolled. And I think I will go ahead and push my luck and go up to drawing 6. All right, we need 6. Well, yellow and green stay because of envy and imprisonment. I'm going to go ahead and return a red and blue. Ooh, that's not great. 3 shadows, 1 power. Let's resolve our power. And you can resolve the shadows in any order. I'll go ahead and put the imprisonment down because there's nothing in the exhaust to flip. The blue, though, the shadow of the depths, means I have to draw and roll 1 dream. And this dream will also have to be resolved. Yellow, and it is exhaust. Since this is not a shadow, it has to be resolved first, so it's going to go into exhaust. And luckily we did imprisonment prior to that, otherwise we'd have to flip that if we left imprisonment for later. Envy will have us re-rolling our first power and getting... Oh, we got it back again. Nice. Doing a good job holding on to our power. Now we'll check for filled rows, and there are none. We do have to be careful though, because we have 2 envy, 2 more, and we lose because that nightmare is awoken. But I could re-roll using my power, and I'm going to spend 1 green to re-roll spooks. I'm going to do these 2 green right here. Oh, that's terrible. Normally these would go right back in place, but I'm going to spend another one because if I can get rid of some of those green, that's the only ones that are on there. Let's hope for a better result. Well, it's better. 1 power means that will go back to the bag. And the other one I'll place on that side. Shift those down. Half of our spooks are gone. Remember, once all of those are off of there, I have to have at least 2 power for every nightmare that has awoke. So I'm going to stop there and keep the 4 power I have. And I'm going to rest, which will bring these 2 spooks down. 1 in imprisonment and 1 in primeval fear. Again, I have to be careful because I have these 2 already awoken. I'm resting so I can choose to get rid of either all my exhaust, which is 1. These are shifting down, and since we have a yellow coming next, I'm going to remove that as my choice for resting. I'm going to keep the aggression going. I want to try and get a little more power, so we'll roll 5 again. I said roll, but I meant draw 5. Well, we only drew 1 yellow and 1 green. We have 2 red and only 1 blue, so we'll put a red and a blue back as our choice. Draw. Oh, that is brutal. All shadows. Whew, there's no good way to deal with this. I mean, I could re-roll. No, I don't want to do that, because there's only 1 of each. Unfortunately, imprisonment means we lock down another shadow in the exhaust row. But the depths means we get to draw and roll another dream. Hopefully it's something really good. It's yellow. That is bad. Well, it's an exhaust. That's better than a yellow shadow. And finally, envy will have to go into place. 1 more of these and that's it. Which means we're going to have to re-roll our first power. Oh, we got to keep it again. Well, at least that aspect we've been lucky. Checking for filled rows, we have our exhaust full, which means we're going to have to draw 1. And if it matches any color in our power, we lose them. And it's green. We are forced to rest, shifting these down. Oops, I forgot this is an exhaust. So it would go up here with the other exhausts. Now I can choose to get rid of something. I do have a green and a red coming, so I think the smart thing to do would be get rid of the green. It's going to keep me exhausted, unfortunately, but any yellow shadows in this next roll, and that's about it for us. But I gotta go for it and draw 5. Hoping for no yellow would be great. Oh, well, that was good luck. We got to keep the green, and I'm actually going to keep the red this time, because if I have to resolve a primeval fear, it'll allow me to move something to the hunt row. Well, it's not going to happen. We have a green shadow, some power, and another exhaust. We'll place our power and we'll skip a space since that's 2. Resolve our exhaust and our envy so we can re-roll our first one here. And we keep the power. That goes back in place. And again, we are forced to rest and draw from the bag. Green. We have no green power, so we don't lose any. But the bad news is these move down, which means we have 4 envy. Game's not over yet because we don't check for filled rows right now. And when resting, I can get rid of either 1 shadow or all exhaust. I'll definitely get rid of 1 shadow. So we're still hanging in there. There's only 2 spooks left. This might be the last turn. I do have a blue and a yellow coming down. As long as I don't have to resolve any dreams in the yellow or green prior to checking for filled rows, I should be okay. I currently have 5 power. That's enough to deal with the 2 nightmares that have awoken. Let's see if I can play conservative and pull out the win here at the last moment. No yellow and green would be nice. Well, we got 1 green. Put the blue away. Well, we have to return 2, that's right. So I can return both blue. So it all comes down to this roll. If we get a shadow, we're going to lose. Anything else, I think we have a shot at winning. We got a power. Nice. We'll place our power. That puts us at 6. Check for any filled rows. The exhaustion is filled. So we have to draw 1 because we're exhausted. And it is red. Now that hurts, but I don't think that ends it for us, because we still have a total of 4. Since we have to stop, these 2 will move down, and that will give us the win because we're not going to check rows and do this one again until next turn, because once the last spook is moved to the Dreamer card, you must have at least 2 power for each nightmare that has been awakened. 2 have been awakened. We have 4 power, so we managed to make it out of our dreams alive and survived our encounter with the Lord of Imprisonment. And that is a quick solo game of Lucidity, 6-sided nightmares. This one is quick to set up and quick to play, maybe 15-20 minutes when you're not doing a bunch of talking like I am. You get a decent amount of replayability solo, because remember, you also have the Lady of Primeval Fear, the Lady of Envy, and the Lord of the Depths. Each of them have their own unique twist on their powers that you have to deal with. Also, if you go outside of the base game, there's additional content but I'm going to rank this one in the above 20 and under 50 because you don't need the additional content. But if you want to use it, let me show you what's in here. And I don't know if this is going to be exclusive to Kickstarter or not, but you have just additional art. And then to make the game family friendly, instead of having the dreamer mat with the eye on it, you have these family friendly versions so you can play with smaller kids and won't be scared of the image. And it came with 4 more of the acrylic overlays. Then you have the Bone Hunter expansion that adds these dice that have different powers. And let me get this for you. As a continuation of the family friendly option, you replace the scary and often violent nightmare cards with family friendly versions of the nightmare cards. Imprisonment, Envy, Nightmare of the Depths, and Nightmare of Temptation is one that you didn't see. That's in the multiplayer game, and that's this one here. It can be substituted for Envy or Primeval Fear. Green side for Envy, red side for Primeval Fear in the multiplayer game to change it up a little bit. And on top of those, you have the Dreamscapes expansion, which adds a different rule. You would draw this at the beginning and it would change the game up when you play it. And also we have the Manifestations expansion, which are things that you can purchase with power that affect the game, like the teddy bear. Return 1 dream on your card to the bag, meditation, and other powers and items that you can gain to affect what's going on during the game. So you can add that expansion to your game in order to ramp up the replayability of it. We have the base game that I showed you. You can get on Amazon for just over $30, and on Cool Stuff for about $21.50. And also remember, you can check for it at your local FLGS or your gaming store. The components are really well made, really nice cards, nice stock. The rule book is super simple to understand. There's not a lot of rules to deal with. The dice, I love dice games. I love rolling dice ever since my old RPG days when I was a little kid. So that appeals to me. And the dice themselves are etched dice. It's not just screen printed on there, so these are not going to wear out. And if you do go for the additional content, the neoprene mats are really nice, especially with those overlays. Those acrylic overlays really make it a lot easier to place the dice and they don't get knocked around during the gameplay. Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the playthrough of Lucidity 6-Sided Nightmares. Again, this is a nice mid-level affordable option, not too expensive at all, especially if you're getting a bunch of stuff from Cool Stuff and you're going over that $100 mark. So you're going to get the free shipping. It's just a little over 20 bucks then. If you would like to see another playthrough using some of the expansion material or just maybe another one of the boogeymen other than the Lord of Imprisonment, please let me know. And maybe that's something I can do for one of my playthroughs over on my Patreon channel. Let me know what you think of the game if you already have it or if it's something you're interested in. And I'll see you in my next video.